Good evening. Due to the COVID-19 emergency, tonight's Committee of Adjustment hearing is being held by video conference and live streaming video on the town's live stream webpage at oakville.ca. This is a hearing to consider applications for minor variance and consents held under the authority of the Planning Act. Please keep in mind the intent of this process is to review the application that is before the committee, listen to the evidence, and then make a decision. This process is not intended to be used to resolve any concerns or disputes that may exist between the town, individuals, or organizations. If a request for a deferral is made and the committee grants such a request, the applicant or authorized agent must contact the Secretary-Treasurer to schedule a new hearing date. In order to conduct an effective and efficient electronic hearing, we have adopted the following process. If you are watching the live stream of this hearing on oakville.ca and if you wish to speak to an item on the agenda, you can call 905-815-6095. Again, the number is 905-815-6095. The phone number will also be posted on the screen below the live stream at oakville.ca. Staff will be standing by to take your call. When you do call in, staff will ask for your name and item number that you wish to address and your telephone number. Further instructions will then be provided to you to call back and join the video conference. When the chair of the committee polls for interested parties, the Secretary-Treasurer will unmute you, and then it will be your time to speak. The applicant or agent will be given the opportunity to briefly explain to the committee the basis of the application and answer any questions that may arise. A maximum of 5 minutes will be provided for a presentation. You will need to state your full name and address for the record. Any submissions beyond the 5 minutes will be at the discretion of the committee. All delegations must also state their name and address for the record, and a maximum of 5 minutes will be provided to make a presentation. All remarks and questions will be directed to the chair, and any submissions beyond those 5 minutes will be at the discretion of the committee. The applicant or agent will then be provided with a further 5 minutes to respond to any comments made by any interested parties and answer any questions from the committee members. If the applicant or agent has any concerns found in the staff report, particularly with the proposed conditions, this is the opportunity to advise us. The matter will then be taken into committee for a decision, and that will mark the end of all discussions. Any person desiring a notice of decision for an application must provide a written request, preferably through email, to the Secretary-Treasurer. Please note that you must make a written request in order to be included on the list that is used by the local planning appeal tribunal for the giving of any subsequent notice of any appeal. Written notice of the committee's decision will be mailed no later than 10 days for minor variances and 15 days for consent applications to the applicant, agent, and or any person who has filed a written request for such a notice. If you do not agree with the committee's decision, you may appeal this to the local planning appeal tribunal, and the last day to appeal the decision to the tribunal will be noted on the decision. If no appeal is received within the prescribed time frame, the decision of the committee becomes final and binding, and the Secretary-Treasurer will then notify the applicant and anyone who received a copy of the decision through written correspondence. People participating in the hearing are to be courteous to and respectful of the members of the committee, town staff, and other people participating in the electronic hearing. Tonight's electronic hearing is being video recorded and available for future viewing at oakville.ca. Thank you. We do not have any regrets this evening. Do I have any declaration of pecuniary interests? I see none. Thank you. At this time, Madam Secretary-Treasurer, do we have any requests for deferrals or withdrawals of applications?
No, Madam Chair, we don't have any requests.
Okay, thank you. We'll then proceed with our first application for the evening, which is application CAB 097 of 2020 at 213 Diane Avenue. This is for a new construction of a 2-story detached dwelling. I have here the agent listed as Lindsay Bruce.
Lindsay Bruce and Joel Tanner are here representing Simple Design Studio on behalf of the clients tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Tanner. Do you have a presentation that you would like to take us through? As you know, town is not in support of your application.
Yes, that would be fantastic. And just to clarify, it sounds like the town is in general favor of the proposal with the exception of 2 items.
That's correct.
We did send in a presentation last week above and beyond the documentation that was provided to the city that you're seeing up here on the screen now. We had a canvassing of the neighborhood, including an evening meeting at 5 o'clock tonight. We have signed paperwork from 3 separate neighbors surrounding the property. There doesn't seem to be any hesitation from any of the neighbors. All of the community is very in support of the proposal. We do feel that it's harmonious with what is happening on that streetscape. Just quickly to note that Conservation Halton does not have any concerns either. I'm going to jump into page 2, which is regarding variance number 1. So variance number 1 is required for the depth of the rear balcony that is projected off the main floor. So I just want to confirm that in our opinion, this is a bit of a technical variance. In discussions with town staff, if we were to introduce a staircase coming off of this balcony down to the rear yard, this particular variance would not be required. Ourselves as the designers as well as the clients do not feel that we do need a staircase coming off of this section. We already have stairs coming off another section of the main floor down to the backyard. So we just want to kind of reconfirm that that indeed this is a minor technical detail related to the staircase not being there and in place. Variances 2, we've had again discussions with the neighbors regarding the side yard setbacks. 3.53 on the westerly and 3.87 on the easterly. Again, we do feel that we've done our part in terms of proposing a building envelope that is staggered, not only in the front facade but also on the side yard and the rear yard, in order to create a strong architectural presence throughout the 360 of the property. And we don't feel that 3.87 on the front easterly, being that that's roof canopy, is intrusive, and we do have confirmation on that neighbor that they don't have any issues with that. The 3.53 on the westerly, we don't have any concerns with those neighbors either. Moving on to variance 4. Variance 4 is regarding the dwelling depth. So I just do want to confirm that the allowable is 20 meters. We're proposing 31.07. The actual structural depth of the dwelling, so the livable square footage dwelling, is sitting at 21.64. The additional nonconformities are coming from those proposed patio spaces, as well as a roofline projection out of the front of the building. So there's about a 6-foot cantilever of that front canopy, which is pushing up to that 31.07. So again, we do feel that because of the way that the front facade was designed with the canopies to be very strong architectural elements, the fact that we're staggering all of the facades, and the fact that the neighbors do not have any hesitation on the proposal that we've heard through our canvassing, we do feel that we've created a proposal that is intact with the streetscape and is not negatively impacting any of the neighbors. Variance number 5 is related to the slight increase in the FSI, which again we don't have any notations on. It's a very, very small minor adjustment on the FSI. And the final element is variances 6 and 7 for the minimum and maximum front yard setbacks. Now, I do just want to touch on the fact that what you're not seeing in this blow up is there's another, about 50 or 60 feet, maybe even more, maybe up to 80 feet of property, which is not owned by our client, nor is it owned by 2 other neighboring properties. It's a fairly substantial proposed cul-de-sac from back in the early development days of the area. So in fact, the front yard setback, as much as we do have variances related to 6 and 7 for the maximum and minimums, we are in keeping with the interior courtyard and what the neighborly homes have situated. And again, these are the small highlighted blue line is related to that front canopy overhang. And then the 10.41 in purple is related to actual structural setback of the garage. So we do feel that these are minor in nature. We would be more than happy to answer any questions that the chair committee might have about the proposal. And we appreciate you listening in on the proposal.
Very well. Thank you, Mr. Tanner. Actually, we really appreciate this presentation and the in-depth analysis of it all. Members, do you have any questions for Mr. Tanner at this time? Ms. Murray, go ahead.
Through you, Madam Chair, to town staff. Were they able to receive copies of those emails of support from the neighbors?
Madam Chair, I haven't received anything yet.
We can.
Mr. Tanner, you have them. You said that this meeting happened at 5. So have you had a chance to submit those?
We've not had a chance to submit, so I do have a signature here, which we can send in for Ian and Michelle Pierce at 209 Diane Avenue with a signature. Richmond and Yasmin Costajan at 196 Diane Avenue, as well as the neighbors at 205 Diane Avenue have both sent in letters of support, which we drafted in terms of what terms they're agreeing to in terms of the variances that we are seeking on the property.
Okay. Does that answer your question, Ms. Murray?
It does, although it would be nice to see them.
Is it possible to put us on video and I can hold them up? I do have physical copies in my hand.
You are on video, you don't have your camera on.
Alrighty, let me just... Okay.
Actually, don't see him here. I think he's calling in.
No, we're on the screen. It just seems that we're having... It's not recognizing the video, which we haven't had in the past. We don't have any adjustments on the Zoom software.
It's okay.
Yeah, let me just host disabled. Yeah, it's not allowing us to turn the camera on. I'm not sure. We've never had that issue before. We have Zoom calls all the time.
Okay.
My apologies, Judith. But we can definitely send those in via email right away for the committee.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any further questions or items of clarification?
I do have one.
Go ahead.
From the drawings that I was provided by town staff, there is a rendering. It appears to be two balconies, actually.
Yes, so the affected variance is related to, if you're looking at the front cover, page A01.01, the bottom image, on the right-hand side, lower end, you're seeing that covered patio, and the variance is directly related to that covered canopy, that outdoor living space. The one on the left-hand side is not required to have a variance because it does have a staircase bringing you down to grade. So it's it's a technicality, so that one we do not need a variance for.
Thank you.
Okay.
No problem.
Ms. Secretary, do we have anyone waiting to speak to this application?
Madam Chair, I don't see anybody waiting to speak.
Okay, very well. So, Mr. Tanner, if you're satisfied, and we will take the matter into committee right now.
Most definitely.
With you. Sure. Okay. Who would like to start the ball rolling and move a motion? Mr. Tulowski?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I'm seeing a lot of technicality to this variance. So I'm going to start, Madam Chair, by recommending that this application be approved as applied for, finding that it meets the 4 tests of the Planning Act. The variance on the balcony projection, the applicant could add a staircase and build the balcony as it's drawn there. And I do believe that is technical, the difference between a balcony or I guess what would be considered a deck in this scenario, and would note that pretty much the entire back of the house has a balcony that's technically not a balcony because of the staircase, but it doesn't change the intended use of the actual space. And I would note that, as I understand it, even if that was not considered a balcony, we still have the issue with the dwelling depth. But Madam Chair, that dwelling depth variance is being caused by a front and rear porch. And I don't see an impact being caused there. We've seen regular applications for houses that are deep, that the entire house extends well into the backyard beyond the houses on either side of it. In this case, this house is actually oriented more across the lot and not deep into the lot. So I don't believe that that dwelling depth being caused by the porches would have any impact. And so, Madam Chair, again, I'm going to recommend that the application be approved as applied for, making it subject to building permit issuing within 2 years, and searching and not finding a reference for the drawings. So, Madam Chair, I'm just going to make that subject to general compliance with the drawings provided to the committee.
Okay. I'm looking through our package now to try and find the date for you.
Site plan is dated September 17th, 2020.
Does that sound right, Mr. Tanner?
That is correct. Yes, that's what we have on file. Thank you.
Okay, very well. So we'll just
I'm not seeing a date on the elevations, so we'll have to leave it as elevations as provided to the committee.
Okay, with the application.
Yes.
Okay, very well. Is there a discussion on this recommendation? I see none. All those in support? Okay. Application. All those opposed? Okay. One opposed, and the application has been approved.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Have a great day.
Sorry.
Madam Chair, and the applicant is going to send in
The letters from the neighbors. Yes,
yeah.
yes, we will get those on record.
Thank you.
We'll send those right in right away. Thank you so much, Committee.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Application CAV 098 of 2020 at 46 Skipper Lane. This is a proposed pavilion shed accessory building structure. We have the agent, Adrian Hordick, and Cedar Springs Landscaping. I do need to read the provisions for the calls every time, so just bear with me. We are now addressing application CAV 098 of 2020. And if you are interested in speaking to this application, you need to call 905-815-6095. Again, the number is 905-815-6095. The phone number is also posted below the live stream page at oakville.ca. Staff is standing by to take your call and will provide you with further instructions to join the video conference at that time. Okay. So do we have the agent for this application present?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, Mr.
Awesome.
Hordick, right?
Hordick,
Am
yes.
I pronouncing it correctly?
Adrian Hordick.
Yes. Okay. Mr. Hordick, you have a presentation. Very well. Go ahead, sir.
So, all right, so good evening, everyone. My name is Adrian Hordick. I am the agent for Mr. and Mrs. Fiddler here at 46 Skipper Lane. If you could skip to the next slide. So our client is doing a bit of a backyard landscaping project, including a pool, and as part of that, we're proposing to put in 2 accessory buildings, one being a pavilion, the sitting area, and one being a shed. And our existing dwelling is actually already over the maximum lot coverage of 25% since it was built earlier than 2014. So anything that we would be proposing in addition to this would require a variance. So what we're proposing is to increase that to 29.66% for these 2 structures. If you could skip to the next slide, you'll see here, and highlighted in green, you can see the 2 structures there. And so the one on the top left corner then is the smaller structure being the shed. So this one does not require a permit, but due to lot coverage, it's included here. And then the one in the top right corner is over 10 square meters. So it would require a building permit, and that's the pavilion there. You could skip to the next slide. Just have a couple images here just to show the backyard and the proposal. So you can see the 2 structures there. Next slide. Just a close-up of the one accessory structure, the pavilion, and then one more. Here's the shed on the opposite side there. And then if you could skip to the end, perfect. So as noted, planning staff is in support of the variance. So we ask you to consider the same.
Okay, very well. Thank you, Mr. Hordick.
Thank you so much.
Do we have any questions from members? Okay, we'll start with Mr. Hardcastle and then followed by Ms. Murray.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I could get Mr. Hordick to confirm that the pavilion building, does it have any enclosed space? Just to please confirm that. And if so, plumbing, electrical work associated with that?
No, none of the above. So it will have one solid wall, as noted on the drawings there, on just a privacy screen there. Otherwise, the other 3 sides are unenclosed, and it'll just be a sitting area, no plumbing or anything like that.
Okay, and no things like a fireplace?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Murray?
I was wondering when the variance was applied for. I did my site visit, and it looks like you've already started construction, which is a little risky.
Yeah, we were wondering if that would come up, and we recognize that there's a risk involved there, and it was sort of after we had gotten the application in. But the argument from others in our company was that it's a structure that does not need a permit. So that was kind of the angle that they were going. Here, I can share my video. There we go. Perfect. Yeah, so there was a risk involved there that we recognize, but the comments are in our favor. So we're hoping that you guys would think the same.
Thank you.
So you did not know that it was that you will need a permit for the pavilion until you put through your application?
Yeah, there was some confusion there between us and the client there. So that's why, we've got everything included in the application now. I think the confusion was that because although the shed doesn't require a building permit, it still needs to be included in the lot coverage, and that was our misunderstanding initially, which is why it's included in now.
Okay. Any further questions or items of clarification? I see none. Ms. Secretary Treasurer, are there any interested parties waiting to speak to this application?
There is nobody to wait for to speak.
Okay, very well. So then we will take this matter into committee. Who would like to move a motion? Okay, Ms. Murray, go ahead.
Madam Chair, thank you. Having conducted my site visit, reviewed the applicant's written submission, as well as the town's written staff report, which I note is in support of this application. And thank you for the comments in the presentation and the forthrightness of the presenter this evening, the applicant this evening, very much appreciated and helpful to understand the situation. I'm satisfied that the minor variance application meets all 4 tests under the Planning Act, and I'm prepared to make a motion to approve the application for variance subject to the following conditions. That the pavilion and the shed be built in general accordance with the submitted site plan dated September 20th and elevation drawings dated September 15th, 2020, and that the approval expires 2 years from the date of the decision if a building permit has not been issued for the proposed construction. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Murray. Is there a discussion on this recommendation? I see none. All those in support? Okay, the application has been approved. None opposed.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Take care.
Application CAV 099 of 2020. If you're interested in speaking to this application at 171 Wilson Street, again, CAV 099 2020 at 171 Wilson Street, please call the number 905-815-6095. Again, the number is 905-815-6095. The phone number is also posted below the live stream page at oakville.ca, and staff will be standing by to take your call and provide you with further instructions to join the video stream. Good evening. See Mr. Hicks. You have to unmute yourself. You're still muted, Mr. Hicks.
Mute.
There you go.
Better?
Yes.
Sorry. Yeah, my video wasn't working until just now either, like the first caller, but it just started though. So,
Okay.
at any rate, thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I'll do a very brief presentation if you wish. This is a variance that was heard by the committee under file A003-2020. This is the same application, but the previous application, the owner decided to flip the house from right to left, and it was deemed by zoning that even though it was the same house on the same site, that it was not deemed to be substantially in accordance with. So they suggested we had to unfortunately come back to the Committee of Adjustment. We recirculated it to the residents. 3 of the surrounding adjacent neighbors that touched the property have all signed letters of support, which you should have in your file. Variances have not changed from our previous application. There's still a floor area ratio and a rear yard setback. Planning certainly still in support of it. We spent quite a bit of time with planning in the first application, and they recognize this is a bit of a odd situation to have to come back, but that was zoning's declaration that if we applied for permit that they would not consider it to be substantially in accordance with. So I understand there's a new letter I was just made aware of today from an owner at 154 Wilson Street who was just concerned with the magnitude of the variance, didn't have any specific concerns, doesn't live adjacent to the property itself. So I think it was more of a general concern with respect to simply asking for variances. And I think our variances are really related to a rear yard setback for a porch, not for the house itself. The house meets that requirement. And the floor area ratio, part of that is caused by some space over top of the garage being over the 6 meter height that we have to count in our floor area. But planning was quite satisfied that we certainly meet the intent and the character of the neighborhood with the suggestion or with the plan that we are proposing. So I think with that, unless the members have any questions, I think it's a fairly straightforward application. As I say, it's we were hoping that we didn't have to come back, but zoning set us back to see you again. So.
Okay, very well. Thank you, Mr. Hicks, for this clarification and the presentation. It's very helpful. Are there any questions or items of clarification of Mr. Hicks at this time? Madam Secretary Treasurer, is there anyone who is waiting to speak to this application? We do note the one letter of objection by Mr. Bill Whitaker. We have read it. It is in our records.
To Madam Chair, there is nobody who is waiting to speak to in regards to the application.
Very well. Mr. Hicks, you're satisfied with the conditions that staff has recommended, and we're ready to take the matter into committee.
Yes, we are satisfied.
Okay. Who would like to move a motion? Mr. Flemington, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Having reviewed the applicant's written submission, as well as the town staff written report noting that it is in support of, given the changes that has occurred with regards to the site. Also taking into account the presentation made this evening by the applicant's agent, noting that there were 3 letters in support of the application, and there was 1 letter of objection. I am prepared to make a motion approving the application as applied for, finding that it does meet all 4 tests of the Planning Act, and noting that the following conditions be required: that the dwelling be built in general accordance with the site plan and elevation drawings reference 4 dated 20/09/21 submitted with the application. And also our second condition, that's our standard condition with regards to the approval expiring 2 years from the date of the decision if a building permit has not been issued for the proposed construction.
Very well. Thank you, Mr. Flemington. Is there a discussion on this recommendation? I see none. All those in support? Okay. The application has been approved. None opposed. Thank you, Mr. Hicks.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. Have a good evening.
Good evening. Okay, application CAV 100 of 2020 at 88 Park Avenue. Again, this application is CAV 100 of 2020 at 88 Park Avenue. If you'd like to speak to this application, please call 905-815-6095. Again, the number is 905-815-6095. And staff is standing by to take your call and provide you with further instructions to join the video conferencing. Okay. I see Mr. Capper. Good evening.
Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, my name is David Capper with Glenn Schnorr and Associates. Our mailing address is 10 Kingsbridge Garden Circle, Suite 700, Mississauga, Ontario, L5R3K6. And as you can see, I have prepared a presentation for this evening. I think, given perhaps somewhat of a complex application, so I'd prefer to walk you through my presentation, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have. And forgive me, my camera's here, but my screen is here with my presentation, so I'm not deliberately ignoring you. I'm just watching that presentation here as we move along. So, Madam Chair, you're correct. The application before you this evening is for the property located at 88 Park Avenue. If I could get the next slide, please. The subject property is very unique. It's a very small parcel. It's actually less than half the size of the required minimum lot area for the RL3 zone. But more unique, in fact, is the building that's located on the property. If I could get the next slide, please. The building itself is actually a designated heritage building. It was built back in the early 1900s, and it is outlined in the slide here in blue. And it is essentially, by definition of the zoning bylaw, it's defined as a townhouse. Although if you viewed it individually on any one of the parcels of record, of which there are 3, it may appear to be a semi-detached dwelling. The building itself straddles the 3 properties that are located at 474 Lakeshore Road, 86 Park Avenue, and then the subject property at 88 Park Avenue. And as I mentioned, it is a designated heritage building. There are a total of 6 variances that are before you this evening. The first variance is a variance under Section 45(2) of the Planning Act, and that variance seeks to recognize the expansion of an existing legal non-conforming townhouse dwelling. That variance is required because the existing townhouse dwelling would not otherwise be permitted in an RL3-0 zone. In terms of build form that is permitted in the RL3 zone, the only build form would be a single detached dwelling, either 1 or 2 stories. In addition to that, there are variances before you for the maximum encroachment into the minimum rear yard for a rear yard deck. And I'll walk you through on the site plan exactly where that variance is, but essentially it seeks permission for a deck to encroach within the 2.95 meters that exists between the rear of the building and the rear property line. There is a variance for a decrease to the minimum required interior side yard. The bylaw requires 1.2 meters, and given the fact that this building is attached to the abutting building, the application seeks to recognize the 0 meter setback to the front porch in the location where it is attached to the adjacent dwelling. There is a variance for a reduced minimum rear yard, and again, that's to recognize the location of the existing building at 2.95 meters from the rear yard. But in addition to that, the garage addition at 3.85 meters. There is an additional variance for a reduced front yard. The bylaw has a minimum required front yard of 4.7 meters, and the variance seeks permission to permit a minimum front yard of 4.18 meters, and that's to accommodate a covered front porch at the main entrance to the building. And then finally, the final variance before you this evening is a variance for an increase in lot coverage. The existing building has a lot coverage of 24.09%. The maximum permitted in the RL3 zone for a 2-story dwelling is 19%. And the application seeks an increase to 40.14%, which is an increase of 16.05%, and it facilitates a 65 square meter addition to the property. And I'll walk you through exactly where those additions are taking place. If I could get the next slide, please. So this is the site plan that's before you. The proposed additions are located on the northerly side of the property with the attached garage and second floor above. There is a 1-story addition adjacent to that garage in the rear yard. And this location here is the rear yard deck and 2.5 meter rear yard setback. And then finally, there's a proposed covered porch. Sorry, just by way of reference, Park Avenue and the lot frontage is located at the bottom of the screen. If I could get the next slide, please. These are just these 2 areas that are highlighted in terms of where the addition is proposed. Next slide, please. And in terms of the elevation, on the right side of the screen is the proposed garage, ground floor garage and second story bedroom addition. What is important about this elevation is that it does include one of the previous designated heritage attributes. The windows that were located on, they are currently located on the northerly facade of the dwelling, have been incorporated into this front elevation with the windows just above the garage door. That is a key component that was described by the heritage planners at the town and wanted to include the preservation of that heritage feature. Next slide, please. Thank you. This is the rear elevation. What you'll note is the large addition, 2-story addition on the left-hand side of the screen, and then the rear deck and rear yard additions over here. Next slide, please. And then finally, this is the northerly elevation. This is the part of the dwelling that is located closest to the northerly property line. And you'll note that the inclusion of high windows in this area here to try and prevent any impact from to privacy from overlook situations. And finally, Madam Chair, I would note that there were a series of letters of support that were provided by our client from the adjacent and neighboring property owners. I think the most important part of those submissions is number one, that all three, two of the other three owners of properties that include the building itself. So that is the owner of 474 Lakeshore and the owner of 86 Park Avenue have both offered their support for the application. And then in addition to that, all four properties that surround the subject property have also provided their support for the application. That concludes my presentation for this evening. I'm happy to answer any questions should the committee have any.
Very well, thank you, Mr. Capper. I see Ms. Murray's hand up. Go ahead.
Yes, Mr. Capper, from the drawings, there appears to be a balcony on the second floor. I see a deck, but I also see a balcony.
Yes, through you, Madam Chair, that is an existing, as I understand it, that's an existing balcony. It's more of a, probably best described as a Juliet balcony. I don't think it's a fully functional balcony. But
so
I
it's an aesthetic?
It's not a very big balcony. It certainly wouldn't function. You couldn't hold a party on that balcony. It's more of a smaller balcony area.
Yeah, so for the committee, I don't know if you guys can see that.
Okay.
So yeah, that's part of the existing structure, and it's going to be incorporated or built out. I'm not sure.
Madam Chair, I think you're actually referring to a part of the building that's actually it's because this is one building. It's part of the building itself, but I believe it's actually on the adjacent property. I do have a picture.
So
somewhere.
Zoning staff has not flagged anything to do with problems or variances that would be required because of a balcony.
Certainly, there's no areas of non-compliance with respect to the second floor balcony.
Okay. While you're searching for that, I'm just going to ask the Secretary Treasurer if there's anyone standing by to speak to this application.
To Madam Chair, Planner Brandon Hassan wants to speak.
Oh, okay. Mr. Hassan, I don't see you on my screen, so I apologize.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to provide a little level of clarification for variance number 1. At the end of the notice, you can see that it's written does not permit a semi-detached dwelling in the RL3-0 zone, but in this particular instance, what we're dealing with is a townhouse dwelling. So I feel that should be corrected if and when the committee decides to make a motion on this application.
Okay, sorry, I lost you. Can you say that again?
Yeah, so for variance number 1 under section 45(2) of the Planning Act,
yes,
the last line says, as amended, does not permit semi-detached dwelling in the RL3-0 zone. That should actually say does not permit a townhouse dwelling in the RL3-0 zone, because that's what we're dealing with is a townhouse dwelling unit or bill form.
Okay. So you would like us to incorporate that into our decision?
Correct. Yeah, I feel like it's just probably a typo in terms of the built form that we're dealing with.
Okay, I see it now.
Through you, Madam Chair, if I could just follow up to Member Murray's question regarding the balcony. Sorry, that is in fact a balcony. It's an existing balcony. I do have a photo of it taken from the neighboring property. If I was able to share my screen, I could certainly bring that up for the committee's benefit.
Go ahead, yes. Town staff, I'm not sure if you'll be able to share your screen, but
it's certainly, for the record, it is certainly on the subject property. It is part of the existing dwelling. Forgive me, I couldn't see the image that was on the screen. It's essentially there's a chimney in the rear yard, and it's above the area where the proposed just above the proposed rear yard deck. But it is an existing situation.
Thank you.
Yeah, Madam Chair, it is illustrated on the west elevation of the drawings that have been submitted.
Yeah.
Under west elevation, it says existing balcony there.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Flemington. Any other items of clarifications or discussion before we take the matter into committee? Okay, I see none. Who would like to move a motion? Go ahead, Mr. Talowski. I keep getting you second, Mr. Hardcastle. The next one's all yours, I promise.
I don't want the next one, Madam Chair.
Would you like this one? You can have it. Mr. Talowski can
I'm
wait.
good, thank you. Mr. Talowski can do this justice.
I'll take the next one from him too then. Madam
You have
Chair,
to play nice.
it's encouraging to see a character house such as this get a new lease on life, and always happy to see Mr. Capper get his exercise by going around the community with 10 letters of support. That's commendable. Madam Chair, I'm happy to move this application to be approved as applied for. I believe Variance 1 is similar to the existing use and of no greater intensity. And Madam Chair, the variances 2 through 6, I believe, meet the 4 tests of the Planning Act, and they're largely being required as a result of the configuration of this property. Madam Chair, I'd like to add a housekeeping note that the notice be amended. What clearly looks like a typo, that the word semi-detached be replaced with townhouse. I don't believe that's a defect in the notice whatsoever, because the first line of variance number 1 clearly states to permit the expansion of existing non-conforming townhouse. And Madam Chair, I would make this approval subject to the dwelling being constructed in general accordance with the final carriage permit, and that a building permit issue within 2 years.
Very well, thank you, Mr. Talowski. Is there a discussion on this recommendation? I see none. All those in support? Okay. Application has been approved, none opposed.
Thank you very much, committee members. Have yourself a good evening.
Good evening. Okay. So, application CAV 101 of 2020 at 401 Lakeshore Road West. Again, it's 101, application CAV 101 2020 at 401 Lakeshore Road West. If there's any members of the public who would like to speak to this application, they should call 905-815-6095. Again, the number is 905-815-6095. The phone number is also posted below the live stream page at oakville.ca, and staff will be standing by to provide further instructions as to how to join the video conference. Okay, so we have Mr. Al-Rawi as the agent.
Good evening, Madam Chair.
Good evening, Mr. Al-Rawi.
Member of the committee. My name is Raed Al-Rawi from Professional Floor Plans, 5147 Preservation Circle, Mississauga, Ontario. I'm the designer and the agent on behalf of the client. and I could go through very fast. Variances. We had been in many rounds with the planning staff until we reached the satisfactory condition. As you can see, the property shape is a little bit strange for Lakeshore. It's a very long property with small width, and if you see the south part of it, it's been developed in a different way. So all these dwellings, rear yards project to our property. The variances are mainly coming due to the fact that we wanted to keep the house as a rectangular or a square shape and bring the garage outside the house to avoid losing a space. And also because of the family special nature, they have a special need child. They wanted to have a indoor swimming pool in the rear. So because of that, we took the garage out of the property, and this initiated a number of variances. One of them is the garage projection. The other one is the minimum setback and the maximum setback, because now the garage is not considered as the main wall. So the house is the same way. It's exceeding the minimum setback and exceeding the maximum setback. And we have a very small variance for the floor area ratio. So basically, after discussing with the planning, and we had visited many locations nearby, we found similar designs, and we followed the Planning Act and the planner's recommendation in order to keep the front elevation as much as possible blended. So we reduced the garage height and we blended the elevation with the existing house. One more comment we have lots of trees actually on the lot, a large number of trees, and we manage with the proper work with the arborist, and because the client is very interested in keeping the trees, we managed to build the whole house with only removing 4 trees, and we proposed with the forestry to have 24 trees being planted as a compensation. So we believe that everything is good and meets the 4 test, and we seek the committee approval. Thank you. I think
Madam Chair, you're on mute.
Mute.
Thank you, Mr. Arawi. I was wondering if there are any questions or items of clarification at this time, Ms. Murray?
Through you, Madam Chair, I was looking at the plans, and it appears that the pool is in an accessory building. Did I get that right?
Correct.
So Madam Chair, there would be 2 buildings, but I didn't see a variance for an accessory building. Did there need to be one? Through you, Madam Chair, to town staff.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair. My understanding, based on the size of the lot, is that the dwelling being within the 0 Suffolk zone, the accessory building is included in the required lot coverage, and there was no lot coverage variance required. So there was no variance required for the accessory building in the rear.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. I was just looking through your notes. Go ahead, Ms. Murray.
Follow up, Madam Chair. In reviewing the accessory building, I'm wondering if perhaps the applicant can review what constitutes the accessory building over and above the pool, please, and thank you.
Yeah, the accessory building will include a pool, change room, and also a small washroom. We were asked by the city staff during the building permit to provide mechanical ventilation for the room. The reason for that, because the family has a special need child that need always exercising, and they want to have his exercising during winter season as well.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Are there any other items or questions? Okay, I see none at the moment. I would like to ask Secretary Treasurer, we have a note that there's a Mr. Martin that would like to participate in the meeting.
And-
Would he like to speak to the application or?
Yeah, he's promoted to panelist and he wants to speak.
Okay, very well.
Yes, thank you. I'm a neighbor and I'm on the west side of the property, and the trees that the applicant was referring to that he will take down and replace with 24 are the biggest and most mature trees on the property. So that affects my property and lots of our neighbor property on Palliser Court negatively. And that's why I'd like to object to that.
Okay, we will have the applicant's agent address your concerns. Are those is that your only concern, Mr. Martin?
Yes, the trees and yeah, that's the only thing.
Okay, very well, thank you. Mr. Rawi, I know you spoke about the arborist report and the trees. Would you care to comment as to
Yeah, Madam Chairman, we are only removing 4 trees from inside the property. All trees on the front yard or the side yards or the rear yard will remain. And even these 4 trees, which is inside the property, if we can see the site plan, it is donated by Cross. These will be compensated.
If town staff can put up
trees.
the site plan, that would be appreciated. It's part of your presentation, right?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, very well.
The site plan, the second plan from the set of drawings. No, not from this report, the other document. The client is a landscape architect, so he's taking care of the trees and want to keep as much trees as he can. And he wants to have a privacy as well. So he doesn't want to touch any tree from the neighboring or near the property lines. So if we can see the site plan. Not this, yeah, okay, great. Yes, this document, you can see there are only 4 trees inside which are in conflict with the house. All the other 40 plus trees will remain the same. Nothing on the boundary, on the 4 boundaries, nothing also on the front yard or the rear yard. Plus, we are in the site plan approval stage. We will plant 24 trees around the south and north and west elevations instead of these 4 trees which are in conflict with the house.
Okay.
All other trees will be preserved and will be kept safe.
Very well. Okay. Thank you, town staff. If we can project back to the panel, thank you. Okay, Mr. Martin, I believe that addresses your concerns.
No, because the trees that he want to remove are way more mature than the ones that he will plant. And
yes, but sir, we've already been through this. They are in conflict with the house. They are in site plan process. So the town staff will weigh in on that on the site. There is site plan approval that deals with these issues. So whether the trees are mature or not is not really the issue. It's whether they are subject to being removed within the purview of the building permits and the site plan approval.
But the removal negatively impacts a lot of properties on Palliser Court.
I'm not going to argue with you. I think the Mr. Arawi has addressed your comments, and we've given you your opportunity to speak. Now it's our time to take this matter into committee. As far as I'm concerned, based on the explanation by Mr. Arawi, I see that all your concerns with respect to effects on the neighboring properties, none of the trees in the neighboring property lines are being removed. So your point does not stand. Mr. Arawi, do you have anything further to add?
Sorry,
I think
I'm
you're
good.
muted.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm good, and I think I would also convey the neighbor concern to the client when they plant the 24 additional trees in lieu of the 4 trees. We'll consult with him regarding the type and size of trees, and we'll consult with all the neighbors. As I said, my client is a landscape contractor, and they are always looking into more trees rather than cutting trees. So this is their duty, and they will make sure that all the neighbors will be satisfied. Thank you.
Very well. I appreciate that comment. Mr. Martin, you will be in contact with Mr. Arawi, and hopefully that will meet your satisfaction. Committee members, do you have any further comments or items of clarification before we take the matter into committee? I see none. Who would like to move a motion and start the discussion? Mr. Hardcastle, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think that the proposed development and the placement of the house has attempted to minimize the degree to which trees will be impacted. This is a challenging site in terms of tree preservation, and I'm glad to see and hear the comments from the owner, from the agent of the owner, as when I did my site visit, I was impressed with the amount of trees on the site, and was actually I struggled a little bit to actually view the site in the dusk setting that I was viewing it in last night, with the amount of trees that were on site, to really get an appreciation for what this property is. It's good to see that there will only be 4 trees, and those 4 trees, unfortunately, because of their placement and size, it will be a challenge to do any level of development of this site without impacting those trees. I'm also satisfied and buoyed by the fact that that there will be significant tree replacement, and there's an opportunity for the owner, town, and the adjacent property owners to work together to determine appropriate tree placement. These are matters adjacent to, but not directly related to, the variances that we are seeing here. So that being said, I am satisfied that the requested variances conform to the 4 tests of the Act, and I will put forward a motion of approval, acknowledging that there were comments that were made by one of the adjacent property owners, and that those have been largely addressed by staff comments process, as well as the comments by the agent for the owner. The motion should be subject to 2 general conditions, those being that the dwelling be built in general accordance with the submitted site plan and elevation drawings dated September 17th, 2020, revision number 3, and that the approval expires within 2 years of the date of the decision if a permit has not been issued. Thank you.
Very well. Thank you, Mr. Hardcastle. Is there a discussion on this recommendation? I see none. All those in support? Okay, the application has been approved, none opposed. Thank you for your submissions.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening. Okay, application CAV 102 at 486 Trillium Drive. Again, the application is CAV 102 of 2020 at 486 Trillium Drive. If anyone is interested in speaking to this application, the number to call is 905-815-6095. Again, the number is 905-815-6095. Staff are standing by to take your call and provide you with further instructions regarding joining the video conferencing. I have a note here. Okay. Mr. Kolbasenko, correct? Am I pronouncing this correctly?
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Good evening. How are you?
Good, thank you. Good. Thank you, committee members, and good evening, Madam Chair, for hearing us out tonight. My name is Tom Kolbasenko. I'm the agent for 486 Trillium Drive. I'm from Our Cool Blue Architects Incorporated, 450 Bronte Street South, Unit 213, Milton, Ontario. This application is for a single-family dwelling in the RL3 zone. We are seeking 2 minor variances. You can go to the next slide, please. We are seeking 2 variances. One is for a larger garage area for tandem garage. So on the front, we would have a regular double-sized garage, and the third parking spot would be towards the back of the garage. And the second one is a slight increase in the residential floor area from the allowable 41% to a increase to 43.87%. I will say that we did submit our preliminary drawings to Mr. Brandon Hassan for initial comment and review. He reviewed the drawings and encouraged us to submit it to the committee. There was no really any objection. We did design the house being very mindful of the Oakville design guidelines for stable and residential neighborhoods. We've done a few of these houses in the past and are quite familiar with the guidelines and what they like to see in terms of redevelopment of these older residential sites. Based on the staff report circulated on Friday, I understand that there is no objections from any town staff, as well as any of the regional agencies. And I understand that there's no letters of opposition or anybody opposing the application. So as far as I understand, we have full support to move forward with these minor variances. Next page, please. It's worth mentioning there is a previous committee decision on this property dating back to 2017. Coincidentally, the increase to the residential floor area was identical to the one that we're seeking this evening. I do not have the previous drawings, so I'm not able to see what that design looked like, but we were basically in line with the same previously approved decision from the committee on this site for the increase in residential floor area. Next slide, please. Just a couple of images on slide 4 and slide 5 of the current property. Next slide, please. It's worth mentioning that the house to the west has been recently reconstructed, and it's of similar scale and proportion to what we're seeking to build on our property here. Next slide, please. The site plan. So we've basically met all of the typical zoning bylaw setbacks, lot coverage, with the exception of the garage and the additional GFA that we're asking for. We are not maxing out the side yard setbacks. We're stepping back. If you want to just skip to the next slide, I think I have a slightly larger site plan blow up here. So the setbacks are 1.2 meters on either side. On the side yards, we're actually 1.33 and 1.34. So we have we've stepped the house away equally from the adjacent neighbors. To the back of the property, there is actually a small little parkette. So there is no directly adjacent neighbor on the rear yard. It's a shared park that's in that common space there. Next slide, please. Just quickly walking through the floor plans. They're fairly standard, conventional designs for these kinds of homes. You can see the tandem garage really has has no impact on the massing of the home or the visibility from the street. You can see a slight dotted line above the garage, which is where we step back the second floor. So we were very careful, next slide please, to step back the second floor on both sides, east and west. Again, very much in respecting the design guidelines for stable neighborhoods, really reducing the massing on the street, making the house appear to be in scale with the adjacent scale of houses. I forgot to mention on the back, maybe we can go one slide back for a minute. We do have a basement walkout, which is at the back of the tandem garage. We have a small covered porch at the back of the house with an outside lounge space, which is within the permissible lot coverage area, and a front porch as well. Next slide, please. So the second floor layout, I guess we can go. Second floor layout, as I mentioned, is very much stepping back. Next slide. So the house is of fairly traditional character. The dormers extend down to the level of the front porch and the lower garage area, really playing down the massing of the dwelling. At the back, we have the covered porch also at a lower level, really bringing down the scale of that back elevation. Next slide, please. These are the side elevations. Next slide, please. And these were not part of the formal submission, but these were circulated to Mr. Hassan early on, just to indicate the massing of the home, really how the roof lines will work, stepping down that second story to be at a manageable scale. Next slide, please. So that concludes my presentation. I hope the committee finds this acceptable. Thank you very much for your time. Any questions? We'll be happy to address.
Thank you, Mr. Kovasenko. Any questions or items of clarification at this time? Ms. Secretary Treasurer, do we have anyone waiting to speak to this application?
No, we don't have.
Okay, very well. Who would like to move a motion in that case? Go ahead, Mr. Flemington.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Having reviewed the applicant's submission, as well as town's written staff report, which I do note is in support of the application. Also, having taken into account the presentation this evening by the applicant's agent, noting that there were no written objections or oral objections presented this evening, I am prepared to move a motion in support of the application, finding that it does meet the 4 tests of the Planning Act, and noting that the following conditions be required: that the dwelling be built in general accordance with the submitted site plan and elevation drawings dated July 22nd, 2020, and our standard condition that the approval expires 2 years from the date of the decision if a building permit has not been issued for the proposed construction.
Very well. Thank you, Mr. Flemington. Is there a discussion on this recommendation? Mr. Tulowski?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I'd just like to take a moment and give credit where credit is due, and perhaps guidance for any future applicants that may be watching this tonight. Madam Chair, I just wanted to note that this application is, in my mind, an excellent example on how to apply for a floor area variance. The applicant's done an excellent job in stepping back the second floor of the building, producing multiple roof lines and an overall design that's compatible with the other houses that have been recently built in this neighborhood. I just thought that was worth noting.
Thank you, Mr. Tulowski. Any further comments or discussion points? I see none. Okay. All those in support? Okay. The application has been approved, none opposed. Thank you, Mr. Kovasenko.
Thank you very much.
Have a good evening.
Good night.
Good night. The next application on our roster tonight is CAV 103 of 2020 at 242 Savoy Crescent. Again, it's CAV 103 of 2020 at 242 Savoy Crescent. This is an application for a rear yard, one-story addition to an existing dwelling. And anyone interested in speaking to this application should call 905-815-6095. Again, the number is 905-815-6095. Staff is standing by to take your call and provide you with further instructions to join the video conferencing. I do have a note, a letter of objection, and I have a note that Miss Lisa Swiney is interested in participating. Is that correct?
It's correct.
Miss Secretary Treasurer, who is the agent for this application?
Mr. Darren Hostra, he is already promoted to panelist.
Hello?
I don't hear him.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Hello, Mr. Hostra. Do you have a video? Okay, there we go.
Yes.
Perfect. Do you have yes, you have a presentation. Very well. Go ahead, sir.
All right, so we have one minor variance request for this application. We would like to we'd like the lot coverage maximum to be increased to allow renovation of a covered porch in the backyard. There is an existing covered porch, as you see in the picture there. And our client would like to add 4 feet to the back of that along the length, just to allow for a more functional and usable space back there. So the increase request is the increase requested is 29.68% coverage from a current limit of 25%. And this, it's worth noting that the existing house is already over that 25% limit. So this proposed addition is only adding 0.63% coverage. I do recognize that there is one letter of opposition, and I believe that this letter does not appear to have a valid concern, as it's just speaking in generalities and has an overall discontent with any development in the area. And it's worth noting that this property is not adjacent to or touching this property and has no direct visual connection to this property either. If you go to the next slide, you can see on site plan, the addition is hatched in red at the back there. So we're just adding to the existing covered porch. And then the next slides show the elevations. So next slide, please. So we're matching the roof line. We're pulling it out a little bit further from what was a flat roof before. Next slide. And that's just showing the existing elevation. Does anyone have any questions?
Okay, very well. Thank you, Mr. Ostra. Who has questions or items of clarification, if any? Okay, I see none. Ms. Secretary Treasurer, is there anyone who would like to speak to the application, or are the participants just listening?
You can mention that anybody who wants to speak can raise the hand, so I can they can speak to the application. Otherwise, nobody raised the hands before, and
okay, I see Mr. Sweeney. I hope I'm pronouncing it right. As a caller, but he's muted. So would you like to speak to the application, sir? We have you noted here as a participant for this application. Okay, I'm getting no response. All right, if there is no one speaking at this time, who would like to move a motion? We can take the matter into committee. Go ahead, Ms. Murray. You're muted. You need to unmute yourself.
Thank you, Madam Chair. conducted my site visit, reviewed the applicant's written submission as well as the town's written staff report, which I note is in support of this particular application. And having taken into account the comments presented by the applicant this evening, thank you. I do note there is one letter from a neighbor, Anthony Falakowski at 1317 Sedgwick Crescent. Thank you to the applicant for helping us understand the geography of where that neighbor is. The letter in opposition seems to be a general malaise with development. In general, I would agree with the applicant's comments. So I am satisfied that the minor variance application meets all 4 tests under the Planning Act. I'm prepared to make a motion to approve the application for variance subject to the following conditions: that the addition be built in general accordance with the submitted site plan dated September 11th, 2020, and elevation drawings revision dated 2020-07-20. And that the approval expires 2 years from the date of the decision if a building permit has not been issued for the proposed construction. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Murray. Is there a discussion on this recommendation? I see none. All those in support? Okay. The application has been approved, none opposed.
Thank you.
Very well. Okay, good evening, Mr. Hoekstra. I apologize. Okay, we have here next. Okay, CAV 104 of 2020 at 1387 Peerless Court. Again, application CAV 104 of 2020 at 1387 Peerless Court. If you would like to speak to the application, the number to call is 905-815-6095. Again, the number is 905-815-6095. Staff are standing by to take your call and will be providing you with further instructions as to join the video conferencing at that time. This is another application for the covered patio edition. Who do we have as an agent? Mr. Harris, is that correct? Good evening. Mr. Harris, you have to unmute yourself. We can't hear you speak, but we do see your presentation.
Better?
Yeah, there we go.
Good evening, Madam Chair and committee. My name is Stephen Harris. I am the agent of the Darren and Stephanie Bovington. And today, basically, we want to add an attached pavilion in the rear yard. Under the zoning, this lot can only have a 20% lot coverage in total. Maybe next slide. So that's the site plan, and you can see the proposed covered patios there. However, the existing house and shed already exceed the required 25%. Therefore, this variance would also be legalizing an existing minor variance. The variance is desirable since the pavilion is already located is in the rear yard, and it won't have any impact on the character of the neighborhood. Next slide. I think next slide. As you can see, that's the constructed pavilion. And basically, if you have any questions or concerns, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, very well, Mr. Harris, thank you. Are there any questions of Mr. Harris or items of clarification from committee members? I see none. Ms. Secretary Treasurer, is there anyone who would like to speak to this application that has called in?
There is no phone callers.
Okay, very well. I believe we're ready to take this matter into committee. Go ahead, Mr. Hardcastle. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Having undertaken my site visit, reviewed the materials, including the written staff report and the deputation from owner's agent. I am satisfied that the requested variance conforms to the four tests of the Act, noting that this is a modest enclosure in the rear, one-story addition to the rear of the building that will have no impact on the streetscape and is centrally located across the rear of the building to maximize separation from the adjacent properties. Also noting that the rear yard remains substantial and usable for other pursuits. So I will put forward a motion of approval subject to two conditions. Those being that the addition be built in general accordance with the submitted site plan and elevation drawings dated July 4th, 2020, and that the approval will expire within 2 years of the date of the decision if a permit has not been issued.
Very well, thank you, Mr. Hardcastle. Go ahead,
Madam
sir.
Chair, I would also note that there were no members of the public present and no deputations given with respect to this matter.
Very well, thank you very much. Is there a discussion on this recommendation? I see none. All those in support? Okay, the application has been approved, none opposed. Very well.
Thank you.
Application CAV 105 at 125 Cross Avenue. Again, application CAV 105 of 2020 at 125 Cross Avenue. The number to call is 905-815-6095, and staff will be standing by to take your call and provide you with further instructions to join the video conferencing. This is a proposed such of an enclosed entrance of a vestibule, and we have Mr. McKay, correct?
Yes, Mr. Mackay.
Mackay, thank you.
Thank you. Staff have placed up a presentation I provided. I'll be very quick as it is a fairly straightforward application. This is the lands at Trafalgar Village Mall, which was redeveloped in the early 2000s. Since that time, the former Loblaws building has been vacated by Loblaws, and so our client has been filling that space with new tenants, including Family Joy Supermarket, which is outlined in blue. If you go to the next slide. The area in red is the proposed vestibule area that our client would like to construct. Next slide. You can see it there, and it would provide an additional covered area as we enter into the supermarket. So to create additional space for entry space for the customers. Next slide. This is just the area of the renovation, as you can see. And go to the next slide. And you can see the elevations that submitted. And if we go to the next slide, there's some red circles. So as you can see here, really the area that's of concern or that creates the variance is filling in the gap between those two structures, which will be provided for as part of the vestibule with a skylight. We can go to the next slide. And the next slide. So unfortunately, the bylaw was set up in such a way to require any type of development that exceeded the current zoning permissions to come forward through some sort of process so that staff could evaluate it to ensure that the long range goals and objectives of the official plan and the Midtown core area could be fulfilled, and that development was not going to undermine those areas. And in this case, and as staff have noted, the proposed minor variance will not do that. If you have to answer questions that community may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions or items of clarification of Mr. Mackay? I see none. I have to ask, out of curiosity, was this something that you decided post COVID-19? I see a lot of businesses trying to have that vestibule kind of amenity where they can stage hand sanitization and entrance and directing in and out entrances. I was just curious.
I'm not sure if it was specific to that, but it certainly will help the situation for sure. It was part of our client's plans, the Family Joy Restaurant Supermarket's plans from the beginning, and they were going through the building permit process, and they were caught up by this matter, and we did have to clarify whether or not a variance was actually required, and it was unfortunately that little notch out of the top that created the situation and why we're here today. Otherwise, it would be constructed already.
Very well. Thank you for your clarification and your submission. If there are no questions or items of clarification, we're ready to take the matter into committee. Who would like to move a motion? Go ahead, Ms. Murray.
Madam Chair, having conducted my site visit, reviewed the applicant's written submission as well as the town staff's report, which I note is in support of, and I thank the applicant for the comments. I can appreciate the vestibule will be a measure of, I would say, energy savings as well, too, because the current doors open up and in the middle of winter would blast any of the cashiers who are located on the other side of those doors and let out a tremendous amount of heat. So I'm satisfied that the minor variance application meets all tests under the Planning Act, and I'm prepared to make a motion to approve the application subject to the following conditions. That the vestibule be built in general accordance with the submitted site plan and elevations drawings submitted with the application, and that the approval expires 2 years from the date of a decision if the building permit has not been issued. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Murray. Is there a discussion on this recommendation? I see none. All those in support? Okay. Application has been approved. None opposed. Thank you.
Madam Chair. Thank you,
Take care.
Have a good night.
You too. All right, the last application of the evening is CAV 086 of 2020, deferred from September the 29th of 2020 at 1389 6th line. Again, that's CAV 086 of 2020 at 1389 6th line. If you're interested to speak to the application, please call 905-815-6095. Again, the number is 905-815-6095, and staff will be standing by to take your call and provide you with further instructions to join the video conferencing. Good evening, Mr. Singh.
Good evening, Madam Chair and member of committee. I am the agent for Anisha Agarwal of 13896 line Oakville. I have three variants to be requested in front of you. I worked the application with the planning department to satisfy the requirement prior to submission, and my variances are the first one is to request an increase of the garage floor area to 56.1, whereas the 45 square meter is approved, is permitted, and the second one reducing the front yard setback to 13.4 meters to align the property with the neighboring properties. And the last one is a very small increase into the RFA. The allowed residential floor area is 383.69 square meter, whereas I'm requesting to be allowed at 385 square meters. And the staff is supporting these variances. And just to be quick, I think I will conclude my submission at this point.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Singh. Are there any questions or items of clarification of the applicant at this time? I see none. Ms. Secretary Treasurer, is there anyone who is on hold to speak to this application?
There is no phone calls.
Okay, very well, thank you. Who would like to move a motion? Go ahead, Mr. Hardcastle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Having undertaken my site visit, reviewed the written materials and heard the comments from the agent for the owner, I will put forward a motion of approval finding that the variances conform to the 4 tests of the Act. This motion should be subject to the 2 standard conditions, those being that the dwelling be built in general accordance with the submitted site plan and elevation drawings dated August 28th, 2020, subject to the removal of the circular driveway to the satisfaction of the Director of Planning Services, and that the approval expires 2 years from the date of the decision if a permit has not been issued.
Very well.
I would note that there were no members of the public present with respect to this matter.
Okay. Is there any discussion on this recommendation? Okay. I see none. All those in support? Oh, Mr. Stain, yes.
I had one comment on the circle driveway.
Yes.
Although it is complying with the section 585 of the bylaws, having a circle driveway on a lot frontage greater of 18 meters, which is the case in this case, and the combined width of both driveway would be less than 9 meters. The reason of proposing a circular driveway on this property was simply to save some of the mature tree at the frontage of the property. You can see on the site plan, one side of the circle driveway is as small as 3.75 meter, and the other side is 3.84 meter. Whereas if bylaw allowed the homeowner to make a driveway up to 9 meter of a width on the frontage of the lot. So in order to protect some of the tree at the frontage lot line, we are proposing to have a circle driveway with a minimal width on both sides.
Okay, so I guess we're backtracking a little bit, and that's my mistake. I should have asked you earlier before I asked for a motion that whether you are satisfied with the conditions that town staff have recommended. So is it your submission that you want to maintain the circular driveway against what town staff is requiring as a condition for the approval?
Yes, it is. It's a request to maintain that to prevent to damage those big trees.
Okay, I need to see your site plan and the drawings for the committee members to take a look at it, because they will have to reconsider that as part of your submissions before we do move a motion on your application.
Okay, it will be on the next page.
So it's not really a circular driveway, it's more like a hammerhead almost, or, well, I don't know. I can see that.
Basically, we are trying to protect both trees at the front lot line. And you can see it's a in order to protect those trees, we are trying to propose a very narrow entrances on both sides.
So why do you need
Madam
the
Chair,
entrances on both trees? Yes, go ahead, Mr. Hardcastle.
Madam Chair, and I apologize for not speaking to this while I was putting forward the motion, but there is, in my viewpoint, there is adequate depth to accommodate a short hammerhead that would allow for turnaround and utilization of a narrow driveway or alternative driveway configuration. I very much stand behind the condition as worded by staff and put forward by myself. I think that there's opportunity to work with the Director of Planning Services to work through the details, but there are opportunities to configure this such that the circular driveway goes away but still maintains the protection of the trees.
I agree with you, Mr. Hardcastle. In looking at the drawings, I was just about to ask the applicant why they need both those entrances. To me, it seems like there's ample space, as you had indicated. So I do agree with you. I'm not sure if we don't need this drawing still up, we can take it down and leave the panel so I can see if anyone else would like to speak. If we need to bring it up, we can bring it up again. Mr. Talowski, thank you. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, a question for staff. The applicant has indicated that the driveway that they propose complies with the zoning bylaw. Is that correct?
Yeah, through Madam Chair, I didn't receive any comments from zoning staff when the application was previously deferred, noting that a variance was required for the circular driveway. It was just a front yard setback variance that was missed.
Okay, so if they are in compliance, they can, for all intents and purposes, maintain the circular driveway. So is this a recommendation by staff for an aesthetic purpose?
Yeah, through Madam Chair. In addition to the comments that Member Hardcastle made, it goes back to the official plan policies and the relationship between the additional garage area. So the additional garage area doesn't facilitate the need for additional paved surfacing and parking in the front yard. So as the driveway sits in or is proposed in the position where it's currently existing, it can be narrowed out to that point where it's 3.84 meters and then flare out to the 6.24 square meters to provide additional parking without that additional curve. On the site plan with the pink line work, it doesn't show a tree that's located in the middle of the curve, so that tree would actually be removed in effect with the circular driveway. So that's what town staff were noting as well in terms of tree removal and landscaping loss.
Okay. Mr. Tlowski, further to that, you have comments? Yes, go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to disagree with the comments made by my colleague. I don't believe the committee is the tool for planning staff to request that an applicant be stripped of an existing right within the zoning bylaw when they're coming forward with the variance. The driveway does not relate to the variances being requested. I don't believe that's an appropriate condition.
Okay. Any further discussion on this recommendation? Or this discussion, basically?
Madam Chair, I concur with my colleague's comments. I find that if the driveway that is illustrated does comply, I agree with my colleague that, as far as providing an approval with regards to the variance, that it is not required to limit it based on the fact that it does comply with the zoning bylaw. So I concur with my colleague's comments.
Okay, so just for clarity, we did have a motion on the table that was initiated, despite the fact that I made the error in not asking Mr. Singh if he was okay with the conditions and had this discussion prior. Mr. Hardcastle, do you wish to amend your motion or withdraw it? I will leave it up to you, and then as we'll proceed with our procedural bylaw after, accordingly.
Madam Chair, I'll leave it on the floor.
Okay, very well. So the motion as it is following this discussion is to approve the application with the conditions that town staff have recommended, including removing the circular driveway to the satisfaction of the Director of Planning Services. All those in support of that motion? Okay. All those opposed? Okay. Mr. Tlowski is frozen, so I did not see whether you voted or you did not. Okay, so are you opposed? Sorry, I can't hear you. Okay, so 3 opposed and 2 for the motion, which means this motion has failed. Who would like to make another motion? So the motion to approve subject to these conditions has failed. Go ahead, Mr. Tlowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I'll move that the application be approved as applied for, finding that it meets 4 tests of the Planning Act. There's no community involvement in this application. I would make that approval subject to the dwelling being built in general accordance with the drawings provided to the committee dated August 28th, 2020, and that the approval expire if a building permit does not issue within 2 years.
Okay, is there a discussion on this recommendation? I see none. Okay, all those in support? Again, you're okay. All those opposed? Okay, the motion to approve, subject to the amended conditions, which removes the second part of the first condition, has passed. Mr. Singh, your application has been approved, and you have your circular driveway, sir.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening. Okay, so we have a minute to confirm for October the 13th of 2020. Who would like to confirm those? Ms. Murray, thank you. And then motion to adjourn. Mr. Hardcastle adjourns the meeting at 8:44.